Welcome everyone to our monthly NOSA webinar. Today we'll be talking about striving and why it's detrimental to us and how we can actually create strategies to choose a different way. And so I am happy that Connie's here with us today. She's actually going to be sharing from her heart. So Connie, take it away.
Tonight we're going to talk about stop striving. And this was kind of really meaningful to me because I've grown up my whole life striving for things. And I'm very much about like doing the best I can. And I've even struggled with perfectionism. And so for me, this has been a really hard lesson to learn. And so I just want to really share out of my own experience why striving can be detrimental for us and how we can move to a new space. So the striving I'm talking about tonight is all about what you can do on your own. There's striving that we can do with others and there's striving that we can do with God. But the one that I'm talking about to stop doing is the one where we try to do it all on our own. I think sometimes we get in the headspace that we have to do it on our own. Right? You are taught independence, or at least I was as a kid. I was taught independence early. And so I became focused on doing everything I could on my own. And I lost some of my interdependence on God in that, thinking that I had to do everything on my own and I had to reach this level of perfection. And God wants us dependent on Him, that we were created to be dependent on Him. So what do we strive for in life? And these are just some of them, but I felt like these would be really important to go over. In life, we typically strive for success or achievement. I, as a child, would strive for perfection. I always felt like if I didn't get an A, then I was failing. We strive for excellence a lot of times in what we do. We strive for greatness in our lives. We strive for glory. When you think of sports that we've done, we strive for victory in our lives. We strive for what we think is best for us. And we strive for our goals and our dreams. We also strive for something better than what we have. And so there's times when we look at our lives and there's things that we want that we don't have. And so we strive for that because we believe that it's better. Sometimes we just strive for progress, strive to move forward, strive to make some headway with something. Sometimes we strive for happiness, to bring happiness into our life. And sometimes it's for fulfillment because we feel unfulfilled by what we're experiencing in that moment. So the one thing I noticed about all these things is there's nothing really negative about these things. These are all good things. They're all positive outcomes. So why am I telling us to stop? It's because when we try to do these things on our own, that they become detrimental for us. That kind of striving breeds a lot of negative stuff in our lives. And these are just some of the ones that I came up with. Striving can breed jealousy because I don't know about you, but when I've tried striving and I see someone who's further along the path than I am, I become jealous of where they're at. When I'm striving, I'm looking at where other people are at, and so I'm comparing with them. Striving breeds independence where you don't have necessarily dependence or interdependence with people, and you think you have to do it alone. Isolation. Once again, if you're independent, then you're trying to do it on your own, all by yourself. And so it can make you feel isolated from other people. Pride. If you start actually succeeding on your own, you start thinking that you don't need other people and you start pushing them away. And that also goes hand in hand with arrogance, where we start thinking that we have it all together, we know everything. Sometimes striving can lead to greed, especially if we're looking at financial striving. And sometimes it can be selfishness. Sometimes it can breed alienation to those who are closer to us because we start striving for things and lose sight of the people that are in our life. It can breed an inability to trust others. I have found that at times when I've been striving, that if I feel like other people are being negative or they're not really being supportive, then I start to lack my trust in them. Or if I feel like they are gunning for something that I am striving for, then I look at them as competition for that. And then I start to not trust them because I wonder what their motives are. So there's a lot of ways that mistrust can come in. Discontentment. Um, reason I say that is because a lot of times if we're striving for things that are better than what we're at, it's because we are discontented with where we are. Striving can breed anxiety in our lives and bring increased stress and frustration because we weren't meant to achieve things on our own. We were meant to rely on God. We were meant to rely on each other. And when we don't, it can cause us great deal of stress and anxiety because we're trying to take all of the stuff on ourselves when that's not what we were meant to do. It can bring on depression if we are constantly failing. We can struggle with depression and despair because we just can't seem to get anywhere. And I'm really happy to say that that's not where we have to be. In John 15:5, Jesus tells us, "Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." And when I was reading this today, it really stood out to me that not only that when we're doing things with God, we produce much fruit, which means we're going to be successful. But apart from God, we can do nothing. And I was thinking about that. And so many times we think we're achieving a lot, but how much are we actually accomplishing? How far are we actually getting if we're not involving God in what we do? And I was thinking about even the past when I've strived to get things done and I've tried to do it in my own strength and my own power. And it just seems like it's obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And it almost seems like the time that I then go, okay, God, I'm done. I can't do this on my own. I need your help. All of a sudden, doors open and it goes so much easier. It can even be something simple. Like I was trying to do our taxes because I was behind in the taxes. And every time I went to go do it, there was an obstacle in the way. And so I just prayed, Lord, you need to clear out these obstacles. I I can't do this on my own. I mean, even the CRA site wasn't up for like 3 weeks. It was like one obstacle after another that was completely out of my control. And sure enough, I was able to do it all in like 2 days when I was actually able to just let the Lord help me do it and clear away all the distractions and everything. And it went really smoothly. And I was so excited to have that done. And that's just one example. And there's so many more in my life where, when I trust God, things just seem to fall into place. We can really do nothing without God. And when I sit there and I think about it even more deeply than that, everything good that I want to achieve in my life, everything good that God's put in my heart, my dreams, my passions are all things that he put in my heart to do. So without him, I wouldn't even have those things to go towards, to move towards, to even hope towards. And so when I started really contemplating how deep this goes, it's very deep. Like we can't even we can't even think about eternity without having God, because it's an eternity we wouldn't want, because he's the one who's given us an eternity that we love, right? He's given us relationship back with God. There's just so much that he's given us, and life without him is pretty full of despair. So why do we try to do it our own before trusting God to help? And I think that's a really key question as we talk about this tonight. Why do we try to do it on our own? I think for me, it's always been about it's what I've been taught. When I was a kid, I was taught to be independent. My parents taught me how to do the laundry at a young age, how to help with dishes and all sorts of stuff. And I would babysit my younger siblings. And I was taught very young that I was meant to be independent. And so when I went into my older years, I carried that belief with me. And I found it really hard to depend on other people. I found it really hard to trust other people enough to depend on them. I found it hard to trust God enough to depend on Him. And I think some of the biggest reason that we struggle is that we don't know if we can trust God. And part of that, I think people tell me that it's because God's invisible, and so they don't know if they can trust Him. Some people have told me that they have trouble trusting God because everyone else has failed them in life, so why would God be any different? And I would just like to say that God is different than every other person in my life, and He has never let me down. But it's always because when I look at it, I have to take away the fact that He hasn't always given me what I want, but He's always given me what I need. So it brings me to the next verse that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take. Proverbs 3:5-6. So as we're talking about striving and moving forward and our dreams and motivations, I think it's important to notice that if we trust God and we lean on His understanding and not our own, He actually shows us which way to go. He actually leads us down which path we're supposed to take. I've seen this in my life where, if I'm surrendering my life to Him or this thing to Him, that He actually shows me the steps I need to take to make it happen. And it's always more simple than I thought it would be. I have this tendency to overcomplicate it. And I find my striving always ends up in me overcomplicating things and getting stressed out over my overcomplication. Whenever God's been in control, it's actually been really simple and really clear on the direction to take. And so it's been really cool actually to see that happen, because then I know whenever things seem really complicated, it's probably because I haven't involved God in the process here. So I need to take some steps in that direction in order to correct it, because I've overcomplicated something along the way. We aren't the only ones who've ever tried it on their own. We're not the only ones that strive to achieve things. The Bible is filled with people who have tried to do things their way. So I'm just touching on a few. I'm sure you can think of others. Like I said, God gives us lots of examples to learn from. Abraham tried to have a child by his own means instead of trusting God. But once Abraham trusted God, He brought Abraham the son that he was promised. Jonah didn't follow God's direction to go to Nineveh and ended up in a whale, but he eventually ended up in Nineveh, and repentance was brought into the city, even though he still was unhappy about it. So almost in spite of him trying still not to do what he was meant to do, God still saved the city through him. Saul was directed by God to fight the Philistines, yet he stood there day after day, too scared to fight. Yet David obeyed the Lord and found success against Goliath. Paul in the New Testament thought he was doing what God wanted him to do in dealing with Christians by imprisoning them. But Jesus revealed to him the truth, and he became a missionary and won many souls to Christ. Complete turnaround for him. The prodigal son went off on his own and realized that things were much better, even for his father's servants, so he returned home. And when he returned home, he wasn't given the level of a servant, he was given the level of a son. And I know that's just a story that Jesus told. However, it's very important because that is how Jesus is with each one of us. If we ever go off our path and come back to him, he welcomes us home. Peter, in an attempt to save Jesus from arrest, cuts off a soldier's ear, but Jesus healed it and was arrested because he knew the greater purpose behind what was going on. Gideon chose an army to fight for the Lord, but God kept telling him to reduce it until there were only 300 men. And that's when God told them him to stop, and then told them exactly what to do, and they found victory. Lot's wife was directed by God not to turn back, and she did, and she turned into a pillar of salt while the rest of the family remained safe and kept going. Time and time again, all throughout the Bible, we see examples of people going their own way and the results of it, and how trusting in the way that God shows us to go brings success and victory in those situations. Trusting God does not mean believing he will do what you want, but rather believing that he will do everything he knows is good. Ken Sande said that. And I think that is very true. God doesn't give us everything that we want, but he does give us everything that we need. And what he knows will be for our good. And I think sometimes people get stuck on, well, I'm suffering and God wouldn't want me to suffer. And I'm like, there's a bigger picture to what's going on than what's in that one moment. And God might have a purpose that's bigger than my suffering in that moment. What if 2 years down the road, I'm through that suffering, I've come the other side, God's brought me through, and I meet someone who is in the exact same place I was? Then I can help them get through it. And that's the greater purpose for what happened to me. And I think sometimes we just get so caught up in the fact that we think that we know what's best for us, that we lose sight that God actually knows what the best plan for us is and what will bring us greatest freedom, greatest joy, greatest liberty. Every time I've been able to help someone that way, it has brought me so much life that I wouldn't have gotten any other way. And God knew that. And it also helped whatever person I was helping in that moment. So striving and surviving versus trusting and thriving. I thought this was a key point in this because striving puts you into survival mode. By the time you're like striving after like day after day after day after day after day and not getting very far, it does put you into survival mode where you're just trying to get day by day and just trying to get through it. But I've noticed when I've put my complete trust in God, I shift into a whole different mode. And I call it thriving mode. Because all of a sudden, it's not about me. It's not about how much energy I have. It's not about how many skills I have. It's not about how good I am. It's not about if I'm enough. It's about, is God enough? Is God does God have all the things that need to be there for this? And when I can look at it that way, all of a sudden I'm like, huh. And I just can operate in so much freedom and so much peace that I don't get when I'm striving. Because I know that whatever I lack, God has. Whether it be a person that he brings alongside me, whether it be something that he supernaturally gives me to get through, whether it be a tool that he shows me to use, to get that done every time he shows up. So the question becomes, how do we go from striving and surviving to trusting and thriving? And I wrote down 5 things here, but I think there's even more. And you may even think of more that are more applicable to where you're at. But I do think that these are 5 important ways. One is we need to trust God more than we trust ourselves. And I think that one is huge because when I was a kid, I was taught to trust myself. I was I was taught to trust in my abilities, taught to trust in my intelligence, taught to trust in what I've been taught to do. And I wasn't really taught a whole lot about giving God complete control over everything. I learned a lot about who God was, but I didn't learn a lot when I was a kid about giving him control. Believing that God wants good things for us and that he has a plan. I think some people get stuck there. There's this one girl who was talking to me just a few weeks ago, and she said to me, if there is a God, I don't think he cares because I've suffered so much in my life. And I said, it's not that God doesn't care. It's that he can't take away the suffering of this world. The fall gave us the suffering in this world. He can't take that away. But he can help us through it. And he has a good purpose in everything that happens to us. He can turn it around for his good and for our good. Follow God's direction and instruction in your life. This comes from God's word, the Bible, and from God speaking directly to you. So similar to Proverbs 3:5-6, God shows us which direction to take. But if we aren't listening or not following, that's when we can go off track. That's when we can get distracted, dissuaded, and it takes sometimes quite a bit just to get back on track. God created us to depend on him. When we venture out on our own, we are not equipped for it and find ourselves stressed, frustrated, and anxious. So for that, I feel like the way you can go from striving to surviving there is that we need to learn how to depend on him. He wants us to depend on him for everything. He said, pray without ceasing. You know, he wants us to talk to him about everything, consult with him about everything. And I think even I'll use NOSA as an example. I help Laura with NOSA. And when it comes to things about what we need to get done in a week, we talk about everything we need to do. We even have task lists. And I would feel pretty left out if one week she was like, oh, I deleted the task list and I'm doing whatever I want and you can do whatever you want. Like I would feel really left out if that happened. But she actually we depend on each other and we work together and it makes a huge difference. We want to know that we're important. Surrender your plans to God is the final one. Toughest, I think, for me sometimes because I can come up with some pretty sweet plans, or at least I think they are, until I try to actually implement them. And then I realize all the flaws that I didn't see coming. And I'm like, God, I surrender this to you because your plan is going to be much better than what I'm feeling right now or where I'm going right now. And a perfect example of that was when I was trying to do my book. I was becoming very frustrated, very stressed out, trying to figure out self-publishing. I kept asking him a bunch of questions and the Lord led me in a different direction. And when I surrendered that plan to him and I just went, wherever you lead, it fell into place. very quickly, very easily, and it was a smooth transition. And Jeremiah 29:11 says it really well. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They're plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a hope and to give you a future and a hope. His plans are for good, right? And they're not for disaster. They're meant to give us hope. They're meant to drive us forward. And he has plans. Many, many plans for us. We don't have to worry that we don't have a purpose. God has given us so much purpose. We just have to be willing to listen as he directs and guides us in that purpose. So the results of trusting God completely and surrendering everything to him. So once we've shifted from the striving and surviving into trusting and thriving mode, what happens? Well, I wrote down 5 things. Once again, I think there are even more than this list, but we only have a set amount of time for tonight. And so I only wrote down 5. One is contentment in your circumstance. No matter what it is, knowing where you are now and is not where you will end. I think being able to be content with where you're at is a huge thing. And it's really hard to attain because so many times we get so focused on our circumstance, our eyes come off of God. And all God wants us to do is focus back on him. Because when we're focused on him, it doesn't matter what our circumstance looks like. It really doesn't, because he can fill us with joy and peace no matter what. And he's the one who then shows us that that's not where we're ending up. He has a better plan. He has something good coming. Number 2, you are able to rest in the fact that God is in control over everything, and his plans for you are good. I already touched on that. You no longer feel the weight of your burdens because you've given them to God. That is a key one. When we give our burdens over to the Lord, he takes them. And an example that comes to me is when I was in Bible college. And I don't know if I've shared the story with you guys again, but if I have, bear with me. Friend of mine from Bible college saw how stressed I was about stuff that was happening at home and all these burdens that I was carrying. And I was praying for all this stuff every day, and I was like feeling really worn down. And so he came up to me and he said, "Can I carry your burdens for a day?" And I was like, "You don't want them. You do not want this load." And he was like, "Yes, I do. I want to help you." And I was like, "Okay." So I told him everything I was carrying. Took me about 45 minutes to an hour. And when I was done, he was like, "You weren't kidding. That's a lot." And I was like, "I know." So he said he would pray for it and he would be thinking about it, and he wanted me to let it go for 24 hours. I wasn't allowed to think about it, wasn't allowed to pray about it. He said, "I want you just to focus on everything else but that." And I was like, "Okay." So for 24 hours, I actually succeeded. I didn't think about it. I didn't pray about it. I let him take it all. And it was the best day that I'd had in months. So when we met back the next day, I was like, "Thank you so much. I feel so much better." And he's like, "Good, you can have it all back. I don't want this anymore." And I was like, "Oh dear." Did I just lose my friend? But no, he was still my friend. But he was very happy to hand it back. And after he left, God said something to me that really stuck with me. He said, "If you had given them to me, I would have never given them back." Because he can carry it. He wasn't like my friend. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't get weak. He can take it. And he takes it freely. And believe me, feeling weightless is a pretty nice feeling. You experience less frustration, stress, and anxiety because you're not carrying things instead of giving them over to God. And you're able to live in the moment, not being overwhelmed with the circumstances in your life. I think living in the moment should be something that we put on a t-shirt. I just want to live in a moment, live in the moment. Because we get so distracted by the cares of our world and by the tasks of the day that I think we miss that. We miss the moments that God has given us, the opportunities, the 25 seconds at a time to even share a smile with someone in the drive-through, or to ask somebody how they're actually doing as you're going through the checkout at the grocery store, or even to say hello to a neighbor who lives down the street. There's so many opportunities in our lives where we can be in the moment, but sometimes we're so busy we miss them. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." And I think rest is something that will come naturally when we surrender everything to God, because it's that weightless feeling. It's that feeling that I don't have to do this on my own anymore. Even knowing that you have a partner in life to do everything with is huge, because you're not on your own. You're not alone. It's kind of why I love the name Nosa. No one stands alone. God is always with you. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. 1 Peter 5:7. He cares about us. And this is why he wants us to give all those things to him. It's not because he doesn't think we can handle it, although most of the time he can handle it way better than we can. It's not because he just doesn't want us. Or, yeah, I don't even know what I was going to say there, but I'm going to just move forward. He just cares so much for us that he doesn't want us carrying all that stuff on our own and being bombarded and weighed down by all of that. When I read this saying, I had to throw this in here. Her name is Lynn Austin, and I thought it was really cute. I don't know if I would ever say Missy to anyone, but I thought it was cute that she says Missy. Faith doesn't come in a bushel basket, Missy. It comes one step at a time. Decide to trust him for one little thing today, and before you know it, you'll find he's so trustworthy, you'll be putting your whole life in his hands. And I think if you don't have enough in you to trust him with everything, trust him with one thing. Like she said, just one thing today. Because he will prove to you he's trustworthy. Activation. This is a challenging one, because when I was actually confronted with this when I was still living in BC, we were trying to adopt my husband's niece, and while we were doing that, they rejected us. We appealed, they rejected us again. And when we were rejected the second time, we both felt like God had led us to apply for this adoption. So why wouldn't he allow it to be successful? We followed the plan. We did everything we were supposed to do. We had prayed about it. We followed what we believed the Lord was directing us to do. Why didn't it happen? And as I was praying, I was like, God, this doesn't make sense. every time you've led me before, I found success. So why this time did I not find success? And he asked me, oh, and also he used to, whenever I'd asked him questions, he always told me why things went a certain way. And he said, will you trust me even if I never tell you why? And I struggled for 5 minutes with that question. How do I truly trust God enough that if he never answered that question, he never answered my why, that I could still trust him? And by the time I got off that bridge, which was 5 minutes later, I could honestly say yes. But it was hard because we know that the go-to answer for Christians is yes, of course, I can trust God. I can trust him with everything. But do we really, really trust God in the depths of our soul? And that's what today is about. We're constantly striving to better ourselves, our circumstances, and our lives. Yet this is not how we were created to experience life. We were created to experience life dependent on God. So when we strive to achieve everything on our own without him, we find ourselves frustrated, anxious, and stressed. So many people have told me that it's hard to trust in God. They find it easier to trust themselves. My question for tonight is this: who is more worthy of our trust, you or God? And like I said, the answer every Christian is trained to say at this point is God, obviously. But do you really believe it? To truly trust God enough to surrender everything to him, you need to know and believe he is trustworthy. And this only comes through relationship. This is why as a kid, I didn't know to hand things over to God. I didn't know to give him control because I knew who he was, but I didn't have that deep, deep relationship with him enough to trust him with everything. That came in my 20s. So for the next 5 minutes or so, I want you to ask God to show you why you can trust him. And I think no matter where you are in your walk with God, there's still areas we can grow in our trust with him. There's still more that we can trust him with. Whether it be, something that just struck up or something that we may not even know, God will show us. And he may show you in pictures. He may show you it with your words. He may even bring a scripture verse to you. He may even just whisper to you. But I challenge you to listen and watch carefully and write down what you hear or see as we do this. And God will show you what you need to know in order to trust him more today. 3 keys to remember. First one is striving to do things on our own without God can end up with us feeling frustrated, stressed, and anxious. And number 2, believing that God has a good plan for you is essential in trusting him. When you can put your complete trust in God and surrender, you'll feel more secure and assured. And I think that comes with increased clarity in the direction that you're going. We find rest when we trust in God with the outcome. We no longer feel the weight of everything on our shoulders and know he has taken it all on his. And I really love this quote by Joni Eareckson Tada. Faith isn't the ability to believe long and far into the misty future. It's simply taking God at his word and taking the next step. And it goes really well with the other one, where she was talking about just taking that one step to trusting God more. And I want to end with this quote. The more you go with the flow of life and surrender the outcome to God, the less you will seek constant clarity, the more you will find those fabulous things start to show up in your life. Mandy Hale. And I whenever I've trusted God with things, I haven't had to constantly be worried about which direction I have to go or what I have to do. And it's been, like I said, easy to see which direction he's leading. It's been easy to follow. And it's pretty amazing to see how each of those things fall into place. And when we're following God's leading, how things just happen in ways that we could never imagine. And the last story I'm going to share tonight is actually me and Walter felt called to move to BC. And for 2 years, me and him tried to make it happen. We tried to save up money, and then a car broke down. And no matter what we tried to do, we just never could make it happen. And then we moved in with Laura and Doug to help during a time when they needed us to. And during that time, God had Walter quit his job, and he severed all of our ties to Calgary in order so that we could move and not feel like we were like leaving people in the lurch here. And it was amazing to see how God did all of that in the course of 7 months. So me and Walter had worked on it for 2 years. We give it to God, and 7 months later, we were there. And it's crazy to see that how God did it. Like he did it so seamlessly. And these are the things that I'm talking about. Like when we trust him, these are the fabulous things that we get to see. And God did so many amazing things in ministry with us while we were there. And I'm just really excited to see what fabulous things are going to come from me trusting him now, today.
For those of you who don't know, Connie and I have for the last 2 years done the 100 Pledge Project. It's our annual fundraiser where we raise funds to um, support the programs that we run. So these webinars and the retreats and mentoring sessions, because we want to make these opportunities as affordable as possible, and in many cases fully subsidized. And we want to keep it that way. And so because we subsidize a lot of these programs, um, everything that we do is funded by donations and our fundraising initiatives. And so, once again, this is our third annual fundraiser, and it's actually taking place from April 1st to 30th. But this year we've done a new twist to it. Not only am Connie and myself doing this project, but we've invited those that want to partner with the vision and mission of NOSA to, like Connie likes to call them, become ambassadors. And come alongside us and, also participate by collecting pledges between $1 and $100. And if that resonates with you and that's something that you're interested in, reach out to us. We'd love to get you a fundraising kit, so you have all the supplies that you need to join this project. And if that's not something that you're able to do at this time, but you really do want to support us, also consider, you know, giving a donation anywhere between $1 and $100. And for those that do become ambassadors, the items you see on the left-hand side of your screen, we have different incentive levels, like for those who choose to be ambassadors and choose to raise funds. Um, depending on what level of dollar amounts that you raise, you can earn different merch items that are branded NOSA, so that you have something to, take around and start that conversation about what NOSA is and how it has impacted your life, and, you know, open it up to other people to become more aware of what we do. Um, so yeah, Connie and I are super excited. And if you want to partner with us in any way, whether it be sharing this project with others, donating yourself, or participating in it, we would love to hear from you. And next month on May 2nd, that's the first Thursday of the month, um, I will be sharing about our topic is called stressed. And you can see the S's are actually dollar signs because what I want to talk about specifically is how to deal with financial overwhelm. I know many of us, you know, are feeling the pinch. We're feeling the weight of what's happening in this world. And, some of us have had spouses not working for long periods of time. We've been under circumstances that have caused a lot of stress. And, I want to talk about how that impacts us on a mental, emotional, but also physical level. And what are some strategies that we can use and implement to help not have that be a detrimental thing in our life, and how we can manage those kind of things as they come. And last but not least, Connie and I have a podcast. It's more conversational style, similar topics that we share here on our webinars, but we share a lot more personally from our own journeys and just the discoveries that we've had, and share it, more, like I said, in a conversation style. So if you love listening to people on the go, consider subscribing so you don't miss any of our newest episodes. And we're available on a few different outlets. I know it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, I think, and Amazon. Was that the last one? Okay, so if you're on any of those platforms, just check us out, and we'd love for you to listen to what we have to say. So, well, thanks for coming this time, and we hope to see you next time.